This is part 2. If you haven't done so, please watch part 1 first. This is 250 Flinders Street, formerly occupied by the PMG or Postmaster General's Department. Many radio amateurs worked in the radio branch or related areas such as telecom, the Defence Forces and private industry, particularly electronic manufacturing and retail. The premises is now a backpackers. 161 Flinders Lane. At one time the home of Stotts Technical College, which offered correspondence courses. For a time, these included amateur radio courses. The bottom floor is currently empty, but it will soon be occupied by Bang & Olufsen. 232 Flinders Lane was the advertised address of Electronic Developments, a major supplier of components and even kits. Next door is 236 Manchester House. The Collins Radio Company had an office in Melbourne, quite appropriately in Collins Street. It was at number 327. 325 is a bank and a golf shop, while the neighbouring building is a walkway, plus a cafe in front. .608 Collins Street, that's where R.H. Cunningham was based. Bob Cunningham, VK3ML, sold a wide range of radio and audio items until at least the 1970s. It's a modest single-storey building, a rarity surrounded by skyscrapers. It's now occupied by a dumpling restaurant and a burger bar. Here at the corner of Bourke and Swanston was and still is Dick Smith Electronics. Many amateurs came down these escalators to buy a few components or check out the latest Yaesu gear. Today, Dick Smith is exclusively a consumer electronics outlet. .118 Lonsdale was the home of ED&E. Much later, they changed their name to All Electronic Components and traded from here until the early 2000s. Rocom or Rockby took them over, but they didn't stay open much longer after that, meaning the CBD was down another electronics store. The premises have since become a restaurant. Somewhere around here is 280 Lonsdale Street. That was where United Trade Sales was based. That's a disposal outlet that was trading in the 60s. It's now occupied by Myers Emporium. This is 359 Lonsdale Street, once the base of Warburton Franke. Warburton Franke have been well known for many years for their test instruments and other apparatus. I believe they were also Heathkit dealers for a while. They were operating from this building in 1964. But by 1966 they'd moved to Park Street, South Melbourne. Education, manufacturing and research were also suburbanising at that time, with examples being Monash Uni at Clayton, Telecom Research Laboratories also at Clayton, and automotive manufacturing at Broadmeadows and Dandenong. As we saw with both McGill's premises, this is another place where massage has replaced electronics as the building's use. And intriguingly, they offer a thing called RF therapy. I'll have to go in and ask them how many megahertz, or maybe sit outside with a shortwave receiver and see if I can pick them up. Testament to this street's electronic heritage is the Bose showroom opposite. I should also mention that next door is Michael's Camera House and what they call the world's largest camera museum. Also just off Elizabeth Street was McGrath's, a long-standing electronic component and kit store. There appears no trace of McGrath's, with the land taken up by the massive Melbourne Central Shopping Centre, which was built in the 1980s. However, I was pleased to see a vintage radio as part of a window display. The newest intact building was Don Don, a Japanese restaurant. Next door to this pub used to be Tex, the electronic component shop, although they did later on diversify into computers. It's currently a construction site, so we can't see much of the building. A good thing I walked down the street, because it's still there in Lonsdale Street, just a few doors up. Add this to our very small list of survivors. Rod Irving Electronics was established in the 1980s and grew rapidly with several stores by the 90s around Melbourne. Rod Irving sold a wide range of components and kits, before later on diversifying into computer boards and the like. With those, people could put together an XT or AT computer for much cheaper than buying one made up already. Rod Irving was known for his aggressive, competitive business style. That wasn't enough, and all the stores were gone by the late 90s. Surviving suppliers bought those parts, with many of them ending up at Rockby Electronics. Directly opposite Rod Irving is Jaycar, which is the only one of two still trading electronic businesses in the city. Their previous address was Unit 2, number 45A Beckett Street, but just recently, about a year or so ago, they moved next door. Their low-rise shop is in contrast to the high-rises going up in the surrounding area. We're now a bit out of the city in the inner suburb of Carlton. This is 78 Elgin Street and the home of Harris Communications, which traded in the late 1990s. This was an interesting shop and would have appealed to many American amateurs, because there are guns on one side of the shop and radios on the other. Harris Communications also sold outdoor accessories like night vision, binoculars and telescopes. I remember seeing verticals and multi-band dipoles on the roof of this shop, but these have now been pulled down. Although Harris is long gone, I still recommend Elgin Street as a place to buy nearly everything, including the kitchen sink. And now we come to Radio Parts. At 562 Spencer Street, just out of the city, it's the longest continuously trading electronics and radio store left in Melbourne. Radio Parts was big in CB radio and hi-fi stereo gear, which it still sells today. They also had a branch store in East Melbourne on the corner of Dandenong Road and Darling Road. This sign, stored at Spencer Street, is a remnant of the old Darling Road store. Although some people regret for the days of more electronic shops like this, the fact is it's never been easier or cheaper to get into radio or electronics. Instead of buying an expensive book, you can now get information free off the web, and components, test equipment and radio gear are much cheaper relative to your pocket money or your average income than they were in the past.